Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ever found yourself kind of wondering, like, why relationships, why do they fizzle out?
Mm-hmm.
Like you start out and it's all fireworks, and then
Yeah.
it's a question we get all the time. And luckily, we've got a ton of research to dig into today on, well, the science of
Yeah.
relationships, and more importantly, how we can actually use that knowledge to, keep things interesting. What do you think?
I think what's so interesting is that we often blame ourselves or our partners when that boredom sets in.
Oh, totally.
But the reality is our brains are actually wired to experience relationships in this way.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit to like those early days,
Right.
the honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
Everything is new and exciting. It's like, are you even really there, or are you floating?
Yeah.
We know it doesn't last forever, but like, what's actually happening in our brains during that time?
Yeah, it's literally like a chemical cocktail that's designed to make us fall head over heels.
No kidding.
It really is. We're talking dopamine, oxytocin, norepinephrine, all these things surge when we're falling in love.
Okay, break that down for me.
So, dopamine, just as an example, that's linked to pleasure and reward.
Okay.
Think about that feeling of accomplishment. Like when you finally beat a really hard level in a video game, you want that feeling again.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Right. And that's dopamine.
So it's no wonder new love is like, it's addictive. It's like our brains are giving us this giant, yes, this is good.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have oxytocin,
Okay,
often called the cuddle hormone,
I've heard of this.
because it gets released with, physical touch. So
Right.
it deepens those feelings of attachment and connection.
It's like the biological equivalent of that like warm, fuzzy feeling you get from like a weighted blanket or something. But then it's like all good things, those really intense feelings, they kind of start to fade.
Right. And this is where understanding the science of it can be so helpful. It's not to say that those initial feelings aren't real
Right.
or to say that long-term love is bad.
Right.
It's just that our brains naturally seek equilibrium. So it's not sustainable to run on those high levels of dopamine and those love chemicals indefinitely.
So it's like our brains basically adjust to this amazing new person.
Yeah.
And then the fireworks, well, they fizzle a little bit.
Yeah.
It makes sense when you put it that way, but it also kind of makes it sound like boredom is just inevitable. So is there a way to work with our brain chemistry to kind of keep the excitement going?
Absolutely. And I think understanding that this shift is natural is the most important first step.
Okay.
And then from there, we can start to be more intentional about introducing novelty and connection into our relationships.
This is where it gets really interesting. So we kind of understand that the honeymoon phase is fueled by these like super powerful chemicals. But then what happens when those inevitably level out? That's where habituation comes
Yeah.
in, right? Our research really dives into that. Habituation, it's not just like a fancy word to throw around.
Yeah.
It's actually like a super fundamental way that our brains like make sense of the world, right?
Totally. Think about it this way. If you hear a really loud noise, out of the blue,
Hmm.
your brain is immediately going to be like, what is that? You know, You think, pay attention, could be danger.
Right, right. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
But then if that noise just keeps happening and happening and happening, eventually you just kind of tune it out.
Yeah.
It's not dangerous anymore. It's just like the background noise of your life.
It's just the way things are.
Exactly.
So like my neighbor who mows his lawn at 7 a.m. every single Saturday.
Oh, no.
It used to like really, I don't know, like wake me up out of dead sleep. But now it's just like, oh, okay, it's Saturday.
Yeah.
My brain like barely registers it anymore.
Yeah. And it's not that the lawnmower is any less loud. It's that your brain has just adapted
Yes.
and gotten used to it.
And the same thing kind of happens in our relationships. So we talked about like that initial dopamine rush.
Yes.
Those everyday loving gestures, the things that used to be really exciting, they kind of just become our new normal.
And as our brains adapt, that rush, it lessens.
So this is why, like those texts that used to be really thrilling, now they're just, hey, can you pick up some milk on the way home?
Exactly.
Okay, so our brains have basically adapted to our partners, which means if we want to keep things exciting, we have to like actively inject novelty into our relationships. That makes sense, but knowing the science behind it doesn't make like the feelings of boredom any less real.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is where the actionable stuff from the research that we read comes in, right? It's not about trying to force those initial feelings to come back because that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
It's about learning how to work with our neurochemistry to actually cultivate excitement and connection.
Okay, so how do we do that? Like, what are some, I guess, practical ways that we can like shake things up, fight back against habituation?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones, and this is backed by a lot of what we read, is to prioritize new experiences together.
Okay.
Remember, our brains love novelty,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be anything huge. It doesn't have to be like a big expensive trip.
Right. Right.
Even small things can make a really big difference.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Like try a new restaurant together
Okay.
that you've both been wanting to try, or like explore a new hiking trail,
Yeah.
or even just like mix up your Friday night routine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like break free from that autopilot mode that I
Yeah.
think we can all kind of fall into.
Exactly. And it's not just about doing new things, it's about doing new things together.
Yeah.
Shared experiences, especially novel ones, they create lasting memories.
Yeah.
And they strengthen your bond.
Like that saying, the couple that explores together stays together.
Exactly.
Okay. So new experiences are good, but what else?
Well, all the research points to this one as being really key too. Communication.
Okay. But not just like, did you pick up the dry cleaning
Yeah.
kind of communication, right?
No. Although I think logistical conversations are important, right? Just for like running a household,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily keep the spark alive. We're talking about deeper, more intentional communication.
Okay. So like more of those like late night conversations you have when you're first dating someone
Yeah.
and you're just like learning everything about them.
Exactly. Make time for those meaningful conversations. Like really ask each other open-ended questions and really listen to the responses. Share your own thoughts and feelings.
It's about like staying curious about your partner,
Yes.
even after, however many years of being together.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to just assume, oh, I know everything about this person.
Yeah.
But like people change, people grow.
All the time.
And our relationships, they should like reflect that, right?
That's such a good point. And that actually ties into something else that can really help, and that's personal growth.
Okay.
But like individually.
Interests.
That plays a huge role in keeping things exciting too.
Okay. So we've got new experiences, deeper communication, personal growth.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, the research we looked at also had some really interesting points about physical intimacy.
It's funny how we forget about the like simple power of touch.
Right.
But it's not just about, intimacy
Exactly.
in a romantic sense.
It goes back to oxytocin, that cuddle hormone we talked about.
right.
Physical touch, like whether it's holding hands, hugging, just cuddling on the couch, or even, yes, being intimate.
Yeah.
All of that releases oxytocin and strengthens those feelings of connection.
It's like a biological cheat code
Right.
for feeling closer.
Right.
But life isn't all like cuddles and candlelit dinners,
Unfortunately, no.
We've got work and errands and maybe kids, and I don't know, it can be tough to like find the time and energy to actually do all this stuff.
Yeah, and I think, that's why the research also really emphasizes how important it is to manage stress together.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Because when we're stressed out all the time, our brains basically go into like survival mode.
Oh, for sure. And romance is like not really high on the survival checklist.
Right. Like who has time for that when you're just trying to get through the day?
Yeah. Tell me about it. I once tried to convince my partner that a weekend getaway was essential for like, survival.
How would that go?
Let's just say they weren't buying it.
But seriously, when we're stressed, our bodies produce cortisol, and that can actually like lower those feel-good chemicals.
Like dopamine.
Exactly.
So it becomes even harder to feel that excitement and connection.
Exactly.
So it's not just about like making time for date nights or whatever. It's about like creating space where we can actually enjoy those things.
100%. And that's where stress management comes in, right? Like finding those healthy coping mechanisms that you can do together.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of thing?
It could be anything. Exercising, meditating, spending time in nature, even just like having a good laugh together.
It's about like being on the same team, even when it comes to stress.
Exactly.
What's really hitting home for me is that it's not about blaming anyone.
Yeah.
If you feel a little bored in your relationship, it's not your fault, it's not their fault, it's just like our brains.
It's biology.
Exactly. And once you understand that, then you can actually do something about it.
It's about being intentional,
Like the quote, relationships take work, but like the work can be fun.
Right. It should be.
So it's not about like these grand gestures all the time. It's just about those little things,
Yeah.
but doing them consistently.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into why relationships get boring and what to do about it.
It's been so fun exploring this with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, we want to hear from you. What resonated with you most? And what's one small step you can take this week to shake things up in your own relationship? Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's just about being present.
And intentional.
Until next time.